Hey there, this is Pat Ennis of Ennis Legacy Partners. Welcome to the Exit Readiness Podcast. I'm here with co-host Walter Dial, CPA and tax partner at GRF CPAs and Advisors in Bethesda, Maryland. Our mission here on the Exit Readiness Podcast is to help you, to provide you, the business owner, with subject matter expertise on topics pertaining to building sellable or transferable business value, and then for planning your eventual exit from the business. We want to help you build a business that's sellable and then exit successfully on your own terms and conditions. Walter, due to the pandemic, there are not a few reasons business owners are finding management of their employees more challenging than they ever have before, along with having to perform their job in a lot of new ways due to the pandemic. For example, business managers are expected to supervise remote staff that they never had to do before, or make sure that vaccination and testing requirements are met, and handle employee accommodation and leave requests, as well as manage client and customer needs. It's kind of crazy, everything they got to do.
Yeah, it's really crazy. It's like all this, all these new requirements put on top of everything else they have to do. We're experiencing it here, and a lot of the clients I talk to, like, they're going through exactly what you've described. It's kind of a new and certainly complicated world out there. And I think today's topic is great because, owners are going to need help getting through this, and they got to make sure their managers are up to speed. This is new for everybody. So it's really important that our business owners realize that they need to help equip their managers, and they need to be equipped too to handle all these challenges. So that's what the focus of today's podcast is. We want to help you as a business owner think through these issues today with our topic, why manager training is more important than ever. And our guest today is employment attorney Marc Engel of Lurch, Early and Brewer, right down the road from me in Bethesda, Maryland. Many of you will recognize Marc. He's been a regular guest on our podcast, and we're happy to have him back with us today. Marc, welcome back.
Thanks very much for having me, Walter, and Pat. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's good
nice to be with you.
Yeah, nice to see you. So before we dig in, why don't you just take a minute and describe your practice to us?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So my practice is fairly wide-ranging. About 85–90% of it is on behalf of employers of all sizes, both for-profit and not-for-profit. I work with the clients that range from a handful of employees to hundreds of employees. And I work with them on basically a soup to nuts employment related issues. Everything from wage and hour issues to discrimination issues, harassment, wrongful termination. I draft all sorts of employment documents. I provide guidance and counseling on a regular basis. These days, an awful lot having to do with vaccines and COVID related issues. But it really runs the gamut. My background is as a litigator, which I did for the first half of my career. So I'd like to think that I bring both the counseling side of it, the substantive employment background, as well as an appreciation for why companies find themselves sometimes getting sideways with employees, or on the other end of tweets or social media outbursts that are not favorable.
Right. So what are you seeing in this COVID world? I'm sure it's taking up a lot of your time now, right? Is that like your main focus, or not really?
Yeah, to a great extent. Walter, really has been a significant part of my practice for the past 18 months or so. It's been quite a journey. And one way or the other, COVID seems to be part of my daily routine in terms of advising clients. So it's been incredibly challenging for the reasons that Pat mentioned at the outset, and you mentioned it as well. I think those challenges sort of break down into several different areas. You've got substantive challenges for managing employees, which is how have duties and roles and responsibilities changed. You've got communication challenges with hybrid communications, people working remotely. You've got motivational challenges with people going through sort of unprecedented stress and in these historic times. And you've got engagement challenges as well, which is keeping and managing employees mentoring employees, providing professional opportunities and challenges, and trying to keep them engaged. And on top of that, there was an article yesterday that came out that I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, I think 4.3 million people quit their jobs in August,
I saw that.
which
Jeez.
is rather stunning, and
Yeah.
sort of speaks to, I think, several things. One is the empowerment, and I think the leverage that employees perceive that they may have. I think secondly, it's testimony to employees being, shall we say, less than comfortable or happy with maybe how things have gone during the pandemic. There's certainly fear that people have about being in certain jobs, but when you take all that together and you consider all of it, it's a very daunting challenge for employers.
Yeah. So given what you just described, especially, the millions of people who have quit their jobs and just the empowerment, it seems like Pat and I were talking before the podcast. I mean, it's more important than ever that your management team is trained to handle these challenges. And it's not, unfortunately not going to be as simple as attending a 2-hour seminar. I mean, this is complicated stuff.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I think as much as anything else, and not to get too lofty about this or too much of an overview in terms of the approach, but it really is a mindset, and it's really a commitment. It's a business commitment to training managers, and it needs to be top of mind, and it needs to be something that the folks are working on, and it's an actionable item every week. Okay, what I like to, I do manager training for clients regularly. What I like to say to them, look, if you would devote 5 minutes a week, just 5 minutes to an issue about in sharpening the saw for, training managers on how to manage, the benefits are almost geometric in my view. Okay, and I think the unspoken here is really important for business owners to understand, is that when I do a workshop that kind of grew out of concerns that I was getting from HR managers and executives saying, look, my mid-level managers, try as hard as they might, don't fully understand why I pick up the phone and call you, Marc. They don't have that appreciation for why employment problems exist, why people become unhappy, why they file claims, and why they leave. And so one of the things that I'm seeing, unfortunately, is that middle managers, and I use that term generically, obviously organizations are very different, but
yeah,
a lot of managers are reticent to ask for help, right? Because they don't want to seem foolish. They don't want to seem like they don't know what they're doing. So they don't come forward. They don't come forward to the HR professionals, if you have one. They don't come forward to the executive team. They don't communicate, and they try to wing it and use their instincts to manage. And if you have that environment, it's one that's really fraught with all sorts of problems and leading to a lot of miscommunication and management that's not as effective as it could be if there was a culture of people feeling like, hey, I can put my hand up and ask for help, and there's no shame in doing so.
Yeah, so hey, Marc, 5 minutes per week in training can make a massive difference. I want to drill down on that. Okay, so at the beginning, challenges: substantive, communication, motivational, engagement. And these are all new challenges put on these business owners that we work with, as if their life was not challenging enough prior, with all kinds of stuff they got to deal with. Now it's just become even more complicated and more complex with these new challenges. And so part of what Walter and I do, as you know, with helping our clients in building these businesses that can be sold and then transferred successfully, is to try to simplify things so that they can actually get some things done regularly, consistently over time that can make an impact without further overwhelming them.
Right.
So that 5 minutes, is that right? Can they really make a difference at 5 minutes a week in training managers? And if so, tell us how they can do that.
Yeah, I really do believe that, Pat. I wasn't, I was being a little bit, I wanted to emphasize a point, and I hope it would have a bit of a reaction, and I think it did. But I actually really believe that. I mean, if you think about it, you're spot on. And my job is an employment attorney, advisor, counselor. What I do is I try to distill all the stuff that's out there,
Right.
right?
Distill. That's right.
Still summarize, harmonize, and break it down into digestible bites. Okay.
Uh-huh.
There's so much information on the internet about laws, and we're all getting, it's a cascade of new laws and new regulations and new this and new that. How do you possibly keep up with it without throwing your hands up? Okay. So 5 minutes a week. What might it entail? Okay.
Uh-huh.
It might entail taking a look and asking ourselves, okay, let's take a look at the last 5 people that left our organization, right, over the past 5 years. And let's ask ourselves, without getting judgmental, just being very clinical, why did they leave? Okay. Was it due to a competitive job? Was it due to wages? Was it due to benefits? Was it due to opportunity? Was it due to a perceived sense that they weren't being treated fairly? And I think what you'll do, if you do that exercise, you'll find some trends that emerge. You know, years ago, you know, at Lurch Early, we lost some fine associates for geographic reasons. Okay, people moved to another part of the country. They moved back with family. Perfectly justified explanation. We needed to sharpen the saw a little bit and ask during the interview process, how can, you know, what are your connections to this area? Obviously nothing's set in stone, but it gave us a better opportunity to have a long-term success, right?
Yeah. So look for those trends and
Look for those trends about why that could be a 5-minute discussion. A separate 5-minute discussion would be, let's put together a list of interview questions and you know, for folks who are hiring. You know, what are the characteristics of the people that have been successful, you know, at our organization, in our company over the last 5 years? What are their qualities? They have passion, they're dedicated, they're loyal, they're self-starters, okay, great. We've got our menu of items. How could we ask 10 better questions during the interview process to elicit whether those character traits that have been the secret sauce for our company, you know, whether someone's got the fire in the belly, as one of my partners used to say. Again, 5 minutes. Okay. Another exercise I do through the manager training is take a piece of paper, draw a line down the middle of the page. Tell me the 10 qualities of the people here that have been successful, right? And the 10 qualities of the folks that have not been successful. Amazing what clues you're going to get from that, right? Another example might be walking through a performance evaluation. Let's take 5 minutes and talk about a hypothetical Mary Smith or John Smith that was a real good performer for the first 3 years, but they've kind of fallen off of that track for the past 6 months or 8 months. How do we evaluate that person? All right. Again, it's
right.
it's
So these could even be actually stand-up meetings, which are often
exactly.
the most
You could set the clock, and I think what happens, in my experience, when it gets baked into the routine, it becomes part of the routine. It becomes contagious, right? So, you know, and there's no end to where you can go with this. I encourage clients to celebrate recommendations that staff makes for improving things around the company. You know, gift cards, Starbucks cards, a shout out, you know, on an internal email, right? And then it gets to be contagious, and you build up a bit of a momentum. And then if you can keep track of the recommendations that you're taking so that people can find them later, let's say it's a set of interview questions. We've got 10 of them. Somebody comes up with 2 more, we add that to the list. And then we've got some reference questions, right? Then we maybe do a 5-minute mock interview. You know, you don't need to go through the whole interview, but you could ask a handful of questions and get the sense of how do you follow up on things. All right. Another thing might be, you know, with the accommodation request, which you just mentioned, 5 minutes. I'm a manager and I've got somebody, you're either mandating vaccines or you're doing testing of both or some hybrid. Someone says, I have a religious exemption or I have a health exemption. How do I handle that? Well, here are 6 things that you need to do. Number 1, ask for help. Bring it to the attention of so-and-so. Number 2, try to fully understand what the nature of the request is. Number 3, get the backup for the request. Number 4, manage expectations in terms of a response, right? Very simple. 5 minutes, hit the clock, the buzzer, whatever you want to do, and we're done. And again, 10 minutes, these things, as they evolve, it becomes part of your culture. People will continue to ask for help. You might set up mentoring relationships, and now you've got something that's going to have I think a ripple effect throughout an organization.
We were going to have John Gruden come in and talk about emailing.
Yeah.
But then we decided that probably wouldn't be the best idea.
Right. There's a whole lot of cautionary tales out there, for sure.
Yeah. Well, we'd get some good podcast ratings if we had Gruden on. So
He's probably available.
yeah, he might be available. Yeah. So the other thing I like about that is you mentioned, well, first off, we just like to, as you put it, distill it into digestible bites. And if you do
that's really
that,
good.
you're more apt to stick with it long term. And anything that's going to be impactful really just needs to be in the culture, like you said, and long term and ongoing. But it also gets at, doesn't it, Marc, this other macro issue, if you will, of managers being reticent to ask for help. If you've got this as a regular routine, you can kind of get at that kind of issue too, can't you?
100%. You're absolutely right. I have a friend of mine, it's a professional service firm, and they have something that's what I think is pretty brilliant. They call it the joy of mistakes. And they sit around in their partner meetings and they talk about what they learned from the week before. And I understand it's a notion that kind of came out of the Marines, but the military, but the managing partner starts out by puts his or her hand up and says, this is the mistake I made and this is what I learned from it. Right. So again, and then people follow suit. So you have a culture of kind of rethinking and revisiting assumptions. There's a phenomenal book that I'm recommending to clients and sent to a bunch of folks called Think Again by Adam Grant, where he does what I think is a masterful job of analyzing that important issue. But it's that sort of mindset that exists, and it may seem a little kumbaya to folks, and I get that. But from where I sit and the things that come across my desk, don't tell my partners this, but 50% of the things that come across my desk probably shouldn't.
Yeah, so you mentioned Adam Grant and Think Again. I'm a big fan of that book too. I love the framework that he puts forth in regard to supporting the principles of humility and curiosity in a scientific approach versus a prosecutorial or preaching or political approach. And boy, if you can establish that paradigm within your organization, that approach of humility and curiosity on an ongoing basis. And again, back to your 5 minute per week, that could end up being 10 minutes or whatever, 15 minutes a week, just a week over a long period of time, where that humility and curiosity about all the issues that managers are facing these days can make a massive impact.
I think it's absolutely correct, because it is daunting enough for folks to try to do their own substantive jobs, right? I mean, think about it. We're all struggling. We're all struggling with. I'll speak for myself. Many of us are struggling with focus. We all, overwhelmingly, folks have family issues. There's life issues. There's children, elder parents, people we're caring for, our own personal health. And that's daunting enough as it is. And what managers don't get a lot of times when they become managers is a toolkit. They don't get a manual. And by the way, I recommend, in addition to your conventional employee handbook, a manager handbook. It's kind of a next level thought. But I think what will happen is it breaks this down for managers to let them know. It communicates several things. One, we senior management get it. We know you got a tough job. Number two, we realize that managing employees in this environment is hard. So there's a cathartic, empathetic aspect to this. Number three, we're willing to work with you and be collaborative about our approach to this. Okay. And we want to be a resource to you. And that can break the anxiety level that exists. And the way it translates into my world, very simply, okay, my view of this is employees in many respects, it's like anything, any other kind of relationship. You sort of, if you make enough deposits into the Goodwill bank account, folks are going to give you the benefit of the doubt. Okay. If I use the example, if I forget flowers and chocolates on our anniversary, my wife, hopefully I've done enough good things over the years that I'm not going to be on the couch for the next 6 months. Okay. You know, I've built up hopefully some
You got a
goodwill.
little bit of relational or political capital there.
Right. You're building up some. So when the employers and management teams invariably wish they had a do-over, the employee is going to say, nah, I'm not happy about it. That's not the way would have handled it. I'm frustrated about it, but I'm not going to A, leave, B, file a claim, or C, go on social media and crush the employer. So that's how it translates into my world. And employees know almost at a visceral level when the management team is trying to do the right thing. And particularly in this environment, I think it's a critically important message to send.
Mm-hmm.
The barriers to employees leaving, I think we're getting lower and lower. The stigma of moving on was getting lower and lower. And I think now with COVID and people re-examining their lives and what they want out of life, and what they want out of a job, they want a connectedness, they want a level of community, they want a level of a meaning to what they're doing. It doesn't take much for people to look for door number 2 or door number 3. And my challenge to employers is, hey, you know, for all the investments that you're putting into staff and your business and building it up and all the successes that you've had, geez, it just seems like the ROI on this is huge,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely huge.
Right.
And Mark, one trend that was occurring before the pandemic and has certainly gone crazy as a result of the pandemic is workers working remotely.
Mhm.
What are some special considerations that business owners have to take into consideration in those circumstances?
Yeah, really important question. I think I would break it down this way. One, let's look at the job description and what that individual is doing. The assumption is they're going to be doing the exact same thing, the exact same way. They're just going to be doing it in their pajamas or their, gym clothes, right? And that may be true in certain instances, but let's check that. So let's check the job description and see if this is changed in any way. You know, do we, instead of doing 10 things or 12 things, is it now a focus for 5 things, right? So let's get that aligned. Okay, that's one way in which it's changed. Okay, number 2 would be, how are we going to remain connected with that individual? If we leave it to chance is what it is, right?
Yeah.
It's variable. Okay, so let's try to bake in some predictability into that. Let's have regularly scheduled times with agendas. They don't need to have to be rigid, but it creates a sense of pattern and routine. So part of this is establishing new routines, new habits. A third thing would be asking people. Amazingly, I see all these surveys, these, survey monkeys and all these wonderful things, and you get 20 questions and how's our IT doing, and how's your computer, and all that sort of stuff. And I go back and I just get a little, I don't know, maybe cynical is the word, maybe, or maybe look at this differently. And I said, let's ask 2 or 3 questions. On a scale of 1 to 10, how happy are you here? Okay, question 1. Question 2, what 2 or 3 things can we do to make your experience better? And number 3, if you were running the firm, company, fill in the blank, what would you do to make things better? Okay, and then just stop and listen to what people say.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you'll get a lot of really interesting feedback that way. And the sense that
That's really good.
And the sense that people feel that you actually care what they think. So I think those are the challenges. And then, whether it's, getting creative for engagement, whether it's figuring out, outdoor events that you can have that people may feel safe in coming to, right? Figuring out a way if people are comfortable having a cup of coffee and meeting outside. Okay, letting that be a guide, getting a little bit away from the Zoom and figuring out creative ways to stay engaged. I haven't heard of another client that does something which I think is incredibly inspired. They partnered with a catering service that works with all the local farmers. So it's all naturally sourced, entrepreneurs. And what they do is I think they give a gift card of $50 a month or something that folks can use towards this service to have meals delivered either to them or to a family member, for a nice, wonderful home cooked meal. And I thought that was just brilliant, right? It's a nice, they're nice, very nice food, delicious and creative menus. And everybody knows that they're going to get a couple meals a month, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. So
So
from just from a strictly legal standpoint,
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Walter.
if you have an employee move to, let's just say, Alabama, every state has different work rules, right? So you got to,
Exactly right.
is it you could run afoul of those possibly, or that's not really a big issue?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Walter, and particularly in this, in the COVID world, with the vaccines and the testing, many of your listeners and may have heard about the new order from from the governor in Texas, prohibiting mandated vaccines. So you do have this, it is what it is. You have this political divide, and you have this crazy quilt of state and local laws. So if folks are working remotely in another state, you certainly need to keep an eye and be mindful of those local laws that you're complying with those, and that can be quite a challenge.
Yeah. Wow.
We have at the firm I'm blessed to be able to work with some attorneys and people I've met over the years, and who have relationships throughout the country. But and we have some resources, but it's something to keep your eye on. If you have staff in other jurisdictions, as to whether you're going to automatically take a certain employment step that may be perfectly fine in Maryland, but maybe not so fine in another part of the country.
All right, so hey, Marc, as we come to a close here, or in our last minutes, actually a couple of probably big questions. Do you think that employers are training their managers as frequently or as well as they should, generally speaking, I guess? And why not, if they're not? And then what, from your perspective, what does effective management training look like?
Right. Two important topics for sure. As it should come as no real surprise. No, I don't think, companies are training managers as often as they should. I think it's not by design. I think it's by circumstance. I think, a lot of companies are obviously, putting out fires figuratively and literally sometimes, right? And trying to deal with the issues that are right in front of them. So it tends to be a back burner issue. And I get that. I understand it 100%. There's only so many hours in the day. So it's a question of prioritization. And I think there's a sense, which I wouldn't agree with, that it may not really matter. There's nothing really you can do about it. Managers are managers, some good, some bad. You take your shot. There's not much you can do about it. That premise I completely disagree with. As to the second part of your question, in terms of effective, actionable training, number one, you can talk about interviewing strategies, right? You can get a lot of return on the investment there. How can we improve the interviewing process? Because most problems start at all roads lead back, in my view, in many instances. Number two, how do you how do I conduct a valuable performance evaluation? And how do I document performance problems effectively? Number three, in terms of the manager training, how do I work effectively with, if you have an HR professional, great, or with senior management for personnel issues? Critically important, okay? A fourth.
Hey, Marc, say number three again.
Yeah, how do I work effectively with either the HR professionals, if you have them, or with the senior management team in terms of communicating about personnel issues, right? So many times I see situations where the senior management, the owners, whatever, they have no idea that there's an issue percolating about harassment, discrimination, and unhappy employee. That would be a third. So that would be a third thing to be talking about in terms of the training. The fourth, I think, would be just a basic overview of the employment laws that apply most typically in the workplace. Okay, things like wage and hour laws. Okay, if somebody is non-exempt and they're eligible for overtime, how are we communicating that we want to keep overtime down, right? We're going to pay for it when it's work, for sure, but how do we manage that, right? Would be a fourth. And then I think a fifth thing would be, looking at, as I said before, looking at the job descriptions and the job duties, because these may have evolved since the last time somebody pulled them out of a drawer 2 years ago, 5 years ago. Okay, if we can spend and make the investment in time to get that job description accurate and correct, then we have a benchmark to evaluate people against. We have metrics, all right? We have a benchmark to provide feedback and professional growth and professional opportunity. So hopefully it reduces the number of surprises. It improves alignment with the employee's expectations, and it makes the manager's jobs much easier, because you sort of take out of the mix, I didn't know I was supposed to be doing that, or I didn't know that was so important to you. So if you do those 4 or 5 things in the manager training, I think you're well on the way. I think increasingly what I'm seeing, in terms of the other trainings that I think are important, the sexual harassment is going to be a big issue. It already is a big issue with folks returning from a hybrid workplace, but even folks working remotely, a lot of bad stuff going on through emails and John Gruden-esque type stuff that's going on, and conflict resolution, I think, is something I've added to the manager training that I do. At a basic level, how are we communicating with one another to hear each other better? And it's an important tool.
Mm-hmm. All right, good. Yeah. So listeners, let's consider adopting that 5-minute per week in training our managers. And then Marc's also given you some good topics to just incorporate into that. The interviewing process, delivering valued performance reviews, working with HR, basic overview of employment laws, and in reviewing job descriptions. That gives you a good list and to start to incorporate into a 5-minute. And then, of course, and Marc, Walter's going to close here in a second. I'm going to ask you if you want to put forth or promote anything today, but let me just promote right now. If you're an owner and you don't want to, you know that these issues are important and they need to be addressed, and you understand the importance of it. What we're really talking about here is protecting the value of your business, and the way you're going to build the value oftentimes is first protecting it. And these issues here help to protect your value and mitigate risk. And so hence it builds your value. And so Marc, of course, and his firm, they help owners do all these things. If the owner doesn't want to, they know the importance and they don't want to do them themselves. So some great content there, Marc. Walter, you want to take us home here?
Sure. Thank you very much, Marc. Been very informative, very helpful. How can our listeners reach out to you? How can they contact you?
Oh, thank you. It's been a pleasure to be with you again. I really appreciate it. I can be reached we're Lurch, Early and Brewer. My email is mrengel, it's ENGEL, at Lurch, LERCH, and then early, like early in the morning, EARLY.com. My direct dials at the office is 301-657-0184, and we're on the web at www.lurchearly.com. We've been doing a lot of writing. I have in particular on a lot of employment-related issues, a lot of COVID-related issues. So would encourage your listeners, if they're interested in that, to visit our COVID-19 workspace on our website. And we're doing seminars and presentations, and we have a business roundtable tomorrow, for example. So happy to be a resource in any way that I can. And then lastly, I want to leave your listeners with something that I just learned about over the weekend. for the vaccine issues, it's called the Health Action Alliance, which is made up of folks from the CDC, business leaders, I think the Ad Council, and it was designed to help employers who are trying to promote vaccines within their workforce and effective strategies for communicating the importance of it, some of the science behind it, the data behind it. It's chock full of really, really interesting information.
Great. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And listeners, if you want help in maximizing the value of your business or planning for your eventual exit, you can reach Pat at 301-859-0860. You can reach me at 301-951-9090. You can also access resources at exitreadiness.com, grfcpa.com, and ennislp.com. As always, thanks for listening. And until next time on the Exit Readiness Podcast, this is Walter Dial and Pat Ennis signing off.